Catherine de' Medici is known for being fabulous, evil, and killing 3,000 people at her daughter's wedding. No one is doing it like Kathy, which is probably for the best. Welcome to the story of Catherine de' Medici. I'm Evil Butts, and this is part 3 of Catherine's story. We've talked about her famous family, we've talked about her marriage and the birth of her children, and right now we are on her second son ruling France. But in reality, Catherine is ruling in his place. France is dealing with decades of civil war, and right now we're in a bit of a lull, so Catherine is able to focus on making powerful marriage alliances for her children. Because though she had 5 sons, it doesn't mean her dynasty is secure. She already married her oldest son to Mary Queen of Scots, but unfortunately her oldest son passed away. Her oldest daughter was married off to Philip II of Spain, but unfortunately her daughter also passed away. But because she wanted to keep the French and Spanish alliance strong, after the death of her daughter, who was married to King Philip, she tried to marry her youngest daughter to King Philip. But her youngest daughter, Margaret, is a wild one, as we'll see later in the story. And with 3 of her children dying in infancy, that means we have 5 more cracks at marriages. Catherine's middle daughter was married off to the Duke of Lorraine, but obviously the most important marriage she needs to arrange is for her son, Charles, who is the current King of France. And because of the religious fuckery going on in Europe right now, Catherine decides she's going to marry her king's son to the Holy Roman Emperor's daughter, Elizabeth, who's part of the Austrian Habsburg clan. But like I said, religious tensions are really high, and Kathy is trying to walk a very fine line. So though she did marry some of her children into Catholic marriages, that wasn't the case for all of them. She had other plans for her wild youngest daughter, Margaret. Even though Margaret was hot for one of those Catholic Guise brothers, but Catherine was like, absolutely the fuck not, and just beat her ass for that. And instead married her off to King Henry II of Navarre, a Huguenot. And in August 1572, the pair were married in hopes that would be a powerful and peaceful alliance, bringing unity in France between the Catholics and the Protestants. But it wasn't. It was a nightmare chaos machine. And just 3 days after the wedding, it gets cracking. Because during the wedding, Paris is full of Huguenots. The leaders, the worshippers, they're all here in town for the big wedding. And they're just trying to enjoy Paris. But as one of the Huguenot leaders is leaving the Louvre, someone leans out a window and caps his ass. And then books it. The shooter is MIA, but they find the gun hanging out the window. So Catherine goes and visits the leader in the hospital and is like, oof, that sucks, homie, but I will get the guy that did this to you. But no one actually knows who did it. It could have been the Spanish, it could have been the Guise brothers, it could have been Catherine herself. And a lot of people did think it was Catherine, and then they went as far as to accuse her of killing the Queen Mother of Navarre with a poisoned handshake glove 007 style. But regardless of who is responsible, a horrible massacre in the streets is about to break out, also known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, which saw Roman Catholic mobs in Paris whooping Huguenot Protestant ass, including the kids, the grandparents, the pets, the pregnant, anyone can get it. Bodies of the Protestants being hung up in the streets and thrown into the river. And Kathy is horrified because she had planned this entire wedding, invited all of these people here as a peacekeeping effort, and now we have a massacre in the streets. But Catherine's son, the king, is on board. He's like, kill them all. I'm sick of their shit. Just gonna try to retaliate if we don't dust them anyway. And so for a full week in Paris, and way longer in the rest of France, they are slaughtering the Protestants, with the estimated death toll reaching around 70,000, 3,000 of that being in Paris itself. And when the dust settles after this wedding, Catherine looks insane. Because hey, what the fuck was that? All of this is giving Kathy the outward appearance of being incredibly cruel, and they're calling her a little Machiavellian queen. They basically thought she was an evil Italian witch monster. A narrative being heavily fueled by the printing press coming into popular use, being used as a tool to spread Kathy propaganda. Because 2 things for sure about the Protestants of the time: they love propaganda, and they hate women. So they're printing all the hot gossip manuscripts about Catherine poisoning her enemies with killer gloves, planning the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, and being an evil witch, which of course was shattering her mother of France image. But Catherine pushed on, and she leaned into that Medici heritage, bankrolling art, culture, and being a huge push in the French Renaissance, which did help build up the prestige of the French court in the eyes of the French people, even if Catherine's own stock was dropping in France. And in this time, her son, King Charles IX, has taken a mistress, made a son, and had a legitimate daughter with his wife. But unfortunately, just a year after his illegitimate son is born, Charles would contract tuberculosis and die in 1574. And because he had no male children with his wife, the crown would be passed to his little brother, Henry. And Henry was already the Duke of Anjou and had been serving as the elected king of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And so he said peace out to that crown and took his place as King of France, with Cathy of course serving in his place in the meantime. Henry goes down as being Cathy's favorite son, and though he came to the French crown as a grown man and already having served on a throne before, he still leaned on Cathy a lot. He had little interest in the day-to-day of governing and instead put all of his attention into religion. So Catherine had a very heavy hand in his government as well. So Henry was sworn in as king, and then 2 days later, he married his wife, Louise of Lorraine, without the approval of his mother. And this pissed Cathy off because she was trying to arrange a marriage with him to a foreign princess. And to make matters worse, this marriage would fail to produce any children. And without any sons, his heir would be his little brother, Francis. But Francis had youngest royal syndrome. He didn't give a fuck about any of that royal ruling shit, and had zero interest in the duties of being Dauphin of France. Actually preferred to spend his time with the Huguenot rebellion. So, despite Catherine's almost lifetime dedication to the Valios Dynasty, it looks like it's about to collapse. Catherine's youngest son, Francis, and the Huguenots end up launching an attack, and they force Catherine and Henry to pass a bunch of rights for the Huguenots, including the ability to build churches and worship publicly, which pissed off the country's Catholics to no end, and the wheel goes around and around. Little brother Francis would keep fucking around for a bit and then eventually die of consumption, which is extremely tragic for Catherine, since that marks the end of sons that would be able to take the French throne, despite Catherine giving birth to 5 boys and 4 of them making it to marrying age. But without the current king having a son, it's all over. Catherine's son-in-law, the Huguenot king Henry of Navarre, was now the heir presumptive to the French crown. He's married to Catherine's youngest daughter, Margaret, but it is a terrible marriage for Margaret. She tried to escape numerous times, so Catherine had no pull in that situation at all. And when Catherine found out that her daughter was taking lovers outside of her marriage, Catherine said she wanted her lovers killed and cut her daughter out of the will completely. So big drama. But in Cathy's later years, she kind of acts as like a traveling diplomat. And traveling around France greatly improved her reputation with the people, all while this obvious war is brewing for the crown of France. Because right now, a Protestant is next in line, and the Catholics will do anything to prevent a Protestant king in France. And so a sort of Catholic Justice League is formed in France. They align with Spain, and it's run by one of the Guises. They are prepared to fight Henry of Navarre if Catherine's last son standing is to die without a male heir. Now we have the Catholics forming an army, the Protestants forming an army, and the current king in the middle like, oh shit. So he half-assed sided with the Catholics and then just went into religious seclusion and left it up to his mom to handle. But luckily, the Catholic army would get distracted by England when old Bloody Bess beheads Mary Queen of Scots. And now the people of Paris are having a revolt against Catherine and her son. Some politics ensue, and eventually, Catherine is pulled away from the court with a lung infection. And while she's away, her son basically dissolves all the jobs of the ministers and invites the Duke of Guise over so they can hash it out. But it was a trap, and when the Duke of Guise walked in, Henry's bodyguard stabbed him to death. And Catherine hated all that, and spent the rest of her life in complete disagreement with what her son had done. But the rest of her life was only a month long, and she died January 5th, 1598, at the age of 69. Passing away, likely of a lung infection. And then her last surviving son was stabbed to death like 8 months later. And now you know the story of Catherine de' Medici. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.